We're back. Hope you enjoyed the intermission. We're going to jump straight into Rule 7, which is the second longest rule in this book, which means we have a lot of ground to cover. And as I said before the intermission, it's also very much the heart of the book. So I'll try my best to deliver it in as heartful way as possible. I won't interrupt very often, except with the Hail Hydras, which are the motivation of this project to begin with. One quick note that I will say, however, is that the illustration of this chapter is that of perhaps the greatest statue ever made, Michelangelo's masterpiece, one of them at the very least. And I just wanted to shout out the illustrator on how good a job he has done in rendering La Pieta in all of its glory, albeit in a 2D form, obviously. Praise be our supreme leader, Red Skull. Rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Hail Hydra. Hang on, I just realized my window is still open. It's a hot summer day, so I'm gonna regret that in the couple of hours it's gonna take to read this entire chapter. But I don't want any noise. There's some children playing in the nearby park, so I don't want them to be interrupting our great leader's words. Part 1. Get while the getting's good. Life is suffering, Hail Hydra. That's clear, Hail Hydra. There is no more basic, irrefutable truth, Hail Hydra. It's basically what God tells Adam and Eve immediately before he kicks them out of paradise. Hail Hydra. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree, of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. That's Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 to 19 from the KJV translation, King James Version. What in the world should be done about that? Hail Hydra. The simplest, most obvious, and most direct answer, Hail Hydra, pursue pleasure. Hail Hydra. Follow your impulses. Hail Hydra. Live for the moment. Hail Hydra. Do what's expedient. Hail Hydra. Lie, cheat, steal, deceive, manipulate, but don't get caught. Hail Hydra. In an ultimately meaningless universe, what possible difference could it make? Hail Hydra. And this is by no means a new idea. Hail Hydra. The fact of life's tragedy and the suffering that is part of it has been used to justify the pursuit of immediate selfish gratification for a very long time. Hail Hydra. Here he quotes from a different book in the Bible. Short and sorrowful is our life, and there is no remedy when a man comes to his end, and no one has been known to return from Hades. Because we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been. Because the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. When it is extinguished, the body will turn to ashes, and the spirit will dissolve like empty air. Our name will be forgotten in time, and no one will remember our works. Our life will pass away like the traces of a cloud, and be scattered like mist that is chased by the rays of the sun and overcome by its heat. For our allotted time is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return from our death, because it is sealed up, and no one turns back. Come, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that exist, and make use of the creation to the full, as in youth. Let us take our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no flower of spring pass by us. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Let none of us fail to share in our revelry. Everywhere let us leave signs of enjoyment, because this is our portion, and this our lot. Let us oppress the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow, nor regard the grey hairs of the aged. But let our might be our law of right, for what is weak proves itself to be useless. That's from the Book of Wisdom, chapter 2, verses 1 through to 11, from the RSV translation, which stands for the Royal Scotland version. No, it doesn't. I just made that up. You'll notice I didn't hail Hydra there just because, as I said previously, hailing Hydra at the end of Bible sentences seems a little bit tasteless. Granted, in this particular scenario, the cynicism being portrayed in Wisdom here is actually deserving of Hail Hydras, but nonetheless, I'll stick to my guns. The pleasure of expediency may be fleeting, but it's pleasure nonetheless. And that's something to stack up against the terror and pain of existence. Hail Hydra. Every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost, as the old proverb has it. Hail Hydra. Why not simply take everything you can get whenever the opportunity arises? Hail Hydra. Why not determine to live in that manner? Hail Hydra. Or is there an alternative, more powerful and more compelling? Hail Hydra. Our ancestors worked out very sophisticated answers to such questions, but we still don't understand them very well. Hail Hydra. This is because they are in large part still implicit, manifest primarily in ritual and myth, and as of yet, incompletely articulated. Hail Hydra. We act them out and represent them in stories, but we're not yet wise enough to formulate them explicitly. Hail Hydra. We're still chimps in a troop, or wolves in a pack. Hail Hydra. We know how to behave. Hail Hydra. We know who is who and why. Hail Hydra. We've learned that through experience. Hail Hydra. Our knowledge has been shaped by our interaction with others. Hail Hydra. We've established predictable routines and patterns of behavior, but we don't really understand them or know where they originated. Hail Hydra. They've evolved over great expanses of time. Hail Hydra. No one was formulating them explicitly, at least not in the dimmest reaches of the past, even though we've been telling each other how to act forever. Hail Hydra. One day, however, not so long ago, we woke up. Hail Hydra. We were already doing, but we started noticing what we were doing. Hail Hydra. We started using our bodies as devices to represent their own actions. Hail Hydra. We started imitating and dramatizing. Hail Hydra. We invented ritual. Hail Hydra. We started acting out our own experiences. Hail Hydra. And then we started to tell stories. Hail Hydra. We coded our observations of our own drama in these stories. Hail Hydra. In this manner, the information that was first only embedded in our behavior became represented in our stories. Hail Hydra, but we didn't, and still don't understand what it all means. Hail Hydra. The biblical narrative of paradise and the fall is one such story, fabricated by our collective imagination working over the centuries. Hail Hydra. It provides a profound account of the nature of capital B being and points the way to a mode of conceptualization and action well matched to that nature. Hail Hydra. In the Garden of Eden, prior to the dawn of self-consciousness, so goes the story, human beings were sinless. Hail Hydra. Our primordial parents, Adam and Eve, walked with God. Hail Hydra. And then, tempted by the snake, the first couple ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, discovered death and vulnerability, and turned away from God. Hail Hydra. Mankind was exiled from paradise and began its effortful, mortal existence. Hail Hydra. The idea of sacrifice enters soon afterward, beginning with the account of Cain and Abel and developing through the Abrahamic adventures and then the Exodus. After much contemplation, struggling humanity learns that God's favor could be gained and his wrath averted through proper sacrifice, and also that bloody murder might be motivated among those unwilling or unable to succeed in this manner. Hail Hydra. Unable sounds like a pun, but it is exactly the word. Part 2. The delay of gratification. When engaging in sacrifice, our forefathers began to act out what would be considered a proposition, if it were stated in words that something better might be attained in the future by giving up something of value in the present. Hail Hydra. Recall, if you will, that the necessity for work is one of the curses placed by God upon Adam and his descendants in consequence of original sin. Hail Hydra. Adam's waking to the fundamental constraints of his capital B being, his vulnerability, his eventual death, is equivalent to his discovery of the future. Hail Hydra. The future, that's where you go to die. Hopefully not too soon. Hail Hydra. Your demise might be staved off through work, through the sacrifice of the now to gain benefit later. It is for this reason, among others, no doubt, that the concept of sacrifice is introduced in the biblical chapter immediately following the drama of the fall. Hail Hydra. There is little difference between sacrifice and work. Hail Hydra. They are also both uniquely human. Hail Hydra. Sometimes animals act as if they are working, but they are really only following the dictates of their nature. Hail Hydra. Beavers build dams. Hail Hydra. They do so because they are beavers, and beavers build dams. Hail Hydra. They don't think, oh yeah, but I'd rather be on a beach in Mexico with my girlfriend while they're doing it. Hail Hydra. Do we know that though? Prosaically, such sacrifice, that is work, is delay of gratification. But that's a very mundane phrase to describe something of such profound significance. Hail Hydra. The discovery that gratification could be delayed was simultaneously the discovery of time, and with it, causality, at least the causal force of voluntary human action. Hail Hydra. Long ago, in the dim mists of time, we began to realize that reality was structured as if it could be bargained with. Hail Hydra. We learnt that behaving properly now, in the present, regulating our impulses, considering the plight of others, could bring rewards in the future, in a time and place that did not exist yet. Hail Hydra. We began to inhibit, control, and organize our immediate impulses so that we could stop interfering with other people and our future selves. Hail Hydra. Doing so was indistinguishable from organizing society. The discovery of the causal relationship between our efforts today and the quality of tomorrow motivated the social contract, the organization that enables today's work to be stored reliably, mostly in the form of promises from others. Hail Hydra. And money is one of those promises, by the way, or one of its forms. Understanding is often acted out before it can be articulated, just as a child acts out what it means to be mother or father before being able to give a spoken account of what those roles mean. Hail Hydra. The act of making a ritual sacrifice to God was an early and sophisticated enactment of the idea of the usefulness of delay. Hail Hydra. There is a long conceptual journey between merely feasting hungrily and learning to set aside some of the extra meat, smoked by the fire for the end of the day, or for someone who isn't present. Hail Hydra. It takes a long time to learn to keep anything later for yourself, or to share it with someone else, and those are very much the same thing, as, in the former case, you are sharing with your future self. Hail Hydra. It is much easier and far more likely to selfishly and immediately wolf down everything in sight. Hail Hydra. There are similar long journeys between every leap in sophistication with regard to delay and its conceptualization. Short-term sharing, storing away for the future, representation of that storage in the form of records and later in the form of currency. And ultimately, the saving of money in a bank or other social institution. Hail Hydra. Some conceptualizations had to serve as intermediaries, or the full range of our practices and ideas surrounding sacrifice and work and the representation could have never emerged. Hail Hydra. Our ancestors acted out a drama, a fiction. They personified the force that governs fate as a spirit that can be bargained with, traded with, as if it were another human being. Hail Hydra. And the amazing thing is that it worked. Hail Hydra. This was in part because the future is largely composed of other human beings. Often precisely those who have watched and evaluated and appraised the tiniest details of your past behavior. Hail Hydra. It's not very far from that to God, sitting above, on high, tracking your every move and writing it down for further reference in a big book. Hail Hydra. Here's a productive, symbolic idea. The future is a judgmental father. Hail Hydra. That's a good start. Hail Hydra. But two additional archetypal foundational questions arose because of the discovery of sacrifice, of work. Hail Hydra. Both have to do with the ultimate extension of the logic of work, which is sacrifice now to gain later. Hail Hydra. First question, Hail Hydra. What must be sacrificed? Hail Hydra. Small sacrifices may be sufficient to solve small, singular problems, Hail Hydra, but it is possible that larger, more comprehensive sacrifices might solve an array of large and complex problems all at the same time. Hail Hydra. That's harder, but it might be better. Hail Hydra. Adapting to the necessary discipline of medical school will, for example, fatally interfere with the licentious lifestyle of a hardcore undergraduate party animal. Hail Hydra. Giving that up is a sacrifice. Hail Hydra. But a physician can, to paraphrase George W. Bush, really put food on his family. Hail Hydra. That's a lot of trouble dispensed with over a very long period of time. Hail Hydra. So sacrifices are necessary to improve the future, and larger sacrifices can be better. Hail Hydra. Second question. It's a set of related questions, really. We've already established the basic principle, sacrifice will improve the future. Hail Hydra. But a principle once established has to be fleshed out. Hail Hydra. Its full extension or significance has to be understood. Hail Hydra. What is implied by the idea that sacrifice will improve the future in the most extreme and final of cases? Hail Hydra. Where does that basic principle find its limits? Hail Hydra. We must ask, to begin, what would be the largest, most effective, most pleasing of all possible sacrifices? Hail Hydra. And then, how good might the best possible future be if the most effective sacrifice could be made? Hail Hydra. The biblical story of Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's sons, immediately follows the story of the expulsion from paradise, as mentioned previously. Hail Hydra. Cain and Abel are really the first humans, since their parents were made directly by God and not born in the standard manner. Hail Hydra. Cain and Abel live in history, not in Eden. Hail Hydra. They must work. Hail Hydra. They must make sacrifices to please God. And they do so with altar and proper ritual. Hail Hydra. But things get complicated. Hail Hydra. Abel's offerings please God, but Cain's do not. Hail Hydra. Abel is rewarded many times over, but Cain is not. Hail Hydra. It's not precisely clear why, although the text strongly hints that Cain's heart is just not in it. Hail Hydra. Maybe the quality of what Cain put forward was low. Hail Hydra. Maybe his spirit was begrudging. Hail Hydra. Or maybe God was vexed for some secret reason of his own. Hail Hydra. And all of this is realistic, including the text's vagueness of explanation. Hail Hydra. Not all sacrifices are of equal quality. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, it often appears that sacrifices of apparently high quality are not rewarded with a better future, and it's not clear why. Hail Hydra. Why isn't God happy? Hail Hydra. What would have to change to make him so? Hail Hydra. Those are difficult questions, and everyone asks them all the time, even if they don't notice. Hail Hydra. Asking such questions is indistinguishable from thinking. Hail Hydra. One small thing that I would add is even the same sacrifices may not be equivalent for different people. Abel apparently had good sacrifices, but even if Cain supplied the same sacrifices, made the same sacrifices, they would not be Cain's sacrifices, so to speak. He would simply be co-opting Abel's. And I think that's a valuable thing to think about. Maybe Cain tried too hard to be like Abel, and so the sacrifices that he made were inappropriate for him to have made. Something like that. Hail Hydra. The realization that pleasure could be usefully forestalled dawned on us with great difficulty. Hail Hydra. It runs absolutely contrary to our ancient, fundamental animal instincts, which demand immediate satisfaction, particularly under conditions of deprivation, which are both inevitable and commonplace. Hail Hydra. And to complicate the matter, such delay only becomes useful when civilization has stabilized itself enough to guarantee the existence of the delayed reward in the future. Hail Hydra. If everything you save will be destroyed, or worse, stolen, there is no point in saving. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that a wolf will down 20 pounds of raw meat in a single meal, Hail Hydra. He isn't thinking, oh man, I hate it when I binge, Hail Hydra. I should save some of this for next week, Hail Hydra. So how was it that those two impossible and necessarily simultaneous accomplishments, that is, delay and the stabilization of society into the future, could possibly have manifested themselves? Hail Hydra. Here is a developmental progression from animal to human. I think this is hypothetical. Hail Hydra. It's wrong, no doubt, in the details. There you go, Hail Hydra. But it's sufficiently correct for our purposes in theme. First, there was excess food. Hail Hydra. Large carcasses, mammoths, or other massive herbivores might provide that. Hail Hydra. We ate a lot of mammoths, Hail Hydra, maybe all of them, Hail Hydra. After a kill with a large animal, there was some left for later, Hail Hydra. That's accidental at first, but eventually the utility of for later starts to be appreciated, Hail Hydra. Some provisional notion of sacrifice develops at the same time. If I leave some, even if I want it now, I won't have to be hungry later. Hail Hydra. That provisional notion develops to the next level. If I leave some for later, I won't have to go hungry, and neither will I lose those I care for. And then to the further next still. I can't possibly eat all of this mammoth, but I can't store the rest for too long either. Maybe I should feed some to other people. Hail Hydra. Maybe they'll remember and feed me some of their mammoth when they have some and I have none. Hail Hydra. Then I'll get some mammoth now and some mammoth later. Hail Hydra. That's a good deal. Hail Hydra. And maybe those I'm sharing with will come to trust me more generally. Hail Hydra. Maybe then we could trade forever. Hail Hydra. In such a manner, mammoth becomes future mammoth, and future mammoth becomes personal reputation. Hail Hydra. That's the emergence of the social contract. Hail Hydra. To share does not mean to give away something you value and get nothing back, Hail Hydra. That is instead only what every child who refuses to share fears it means, Hail Hydra. To share means properly to initiate the process of trade, Hail Hydra. A child who can't share, who can't trade, can't have any friends, because having friends is a form of trade. Hail Hydra. Benjamin Franklin once suggested that a newcomer to a neighborhood ask a new neighbor to do him or her a favor, citing an old maxim, "He that has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than he whom you yourself have obliged." Hail Hydra. In Franklin's opinion, asking someone for something, not too extreme obviously, was the most useful and immediate invitation to social interaction. Hail Hydra. Such asking on the part of the newcomer provided the neighbor with an opportunity to show him or herself as a good person at first encounter. Hail Hydra. It also meant that the latter could now ask the former for a favor in return because of the debt incurred, increasing their mutual familiarity and trust. Hail Hydra. In that manner, both parties could overcome their natural hesitancy and mutual fear of the stranger. Hail Hydra. It is better to have something than nothing. Hail Hydra. It's better yet to share generously the something that you have. Hail Hydra. It's even better than that, however, to become widely known for generous sharing. Hail Hydra, that's something that lasts. Hail Hydra, that's something that's reliable. Hail Hydra. And at this point of abstraction, we can observe how the groundwork for the conceptions reliable, honest, and generous had been laid. Hail Hydra. The basis for an articulated morality was put in place. Hail Hydra. The productive, truthful sharer is the prototype for the good citizen and the good man. Hail Hydra. We can see in this manner how, from the simple notion that leftovers are a good idea, the highest moral principles might emerge. Hail Hydra. It's as if something like the following happened as humanity developed. Hail Hydra. First were the endless tens or hundreds of thousands of years prior to the emergence of written history and drama. Hail Hydra. During this time, the twin practices of delay and exchange began to emerge, slowly and painfully. Hail Hydra. Then they became represented in metaphorical abstractions as rituals and tales of sacrifice, told in a manner such as this. It's as if there is a powerful figure in the sky who sees all and is judging you. Hail Hydra. Giving up something you value seems to make him happy, and you want to make him happy because all hell breaks loose if you don't. Hail Hydra. So practice sacrificing and sharing until you become expert at it, and things will go well for you. Hail Hydra. No one said any of this, at least not so plainly and directly, Hail Hydra, but it was implicit in the practice and then in the stories. Hail Hydra. Action came first, as it had to, as the animals we once were could act but could not think. Hail Hydra. Implicit, unrecognized value came first, as the actions that preceded thought embodied value but could not make that value explicit. Hail Hydra. People watched the successful succeed and the unsuccessful fail for thousands and thousands of years. Hail Hydra. We thought it over and drew a conclusion. The successful among us delay gratification. Hail Hydra. The successful among us bargain with the future. Hail Hydra. A great idea begins to emerge, taking ever more clearly articulated form in ever more clearly articulated stories. What's the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful? Hail Hydra. The successful sacrifice. Hail Hydra. Things get better as the successful practice their sacrifices. Hail Hydra. The questions become increasingly precise and simultaneously broader. What is the greatest possible sacrifice? Hail Hydra. For the greatest possible good? Hail Hydra. And the answers become increasingly deeper and profound. Hail Hydra. There's a footnote here that I accidentally skipped over. All of this is true whether or not there actually is such a powerful figure in the sky. Smiley face. Hail Hydra. Returning to the text. The god of Western tradition, like so many gods, requires sacrifice. Hail Hydra. We have already examined why. Hail Hydra. But sometimes he goes even further. Hail Hydra. He demands not only sacrifice, but the sacrifice of precisely what is loved best. Hail Hydra. This is most starkly portrayed and most confusingly evident in the story of Abraham and Isaac. Hail Hydra. Abraham, beloved of God, long wanted a son, and God promised him exactly that. After many delays, and under the apparently impossible conditions of old age and a long, barren wife. Hail Hydra, but not so long afterward, when the miraculously born Isaac is still a child. God turns around and in unreasonable and apparently barbaric fashion demands that his faithful servant offer his son as a sacrifice. Hail Hydra. The story ends happily. God sends an angel to stay Abraham's obedient hand and accepts a ram in Isaac's stead. Hail Hydra. And that's a good thing, but it doesn't really address the issue at hand. Why was God's going further necessary? Hail Hydra. Why does life impose such demands? Hail Hydra. We'll start our analysis with a truism, stark, self-evident, and understated. Sometimes things do not go well. Or as the Germans would say, as a Hydra agent would say, manchmal geht es schlecht. I think that's correct German. I might have forgotten a couple of grammatical rules. Hail Hydra. That seems to have much to do with the terrible nature of the world, with its plagues and famines and tyrannies and betrayals. Hail Hydra, but here's the rub. Sometimes when things are not going well, it's not the world that's the cause. Hail Hydra, the cause is instead that which is currently most valued, subjectively and personally. Hail Hydra. Why? Hail Hydra, because the world is revealed to an indeterminate degree through the template of your values. Much more on this in Rule 10. Hail Hydra. If the world you are seeing is not the world you want, therefore, it's time to examine your values. Hail Hydra, it's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. Hail Hydra, it's time to let go. Hail Hydra. It might even be time to sacrifice what you love best, so that you can become who you might become instead of staying who you are. Hail Hydra. There's an old and possibly apocryphal tricky word. There's an old and possibly apocryphal story about how to catch a monkey that illustrates this set of ideas very well. Hail Hydra. First, you must find a large, narrow-necked jar, just barely wide enough in diameter at the top for a monkey to put its hand inside. Hail Hydra. Then you must fill the jar partway with rocks, so it is too heavy for a monkey to carry. Hail Hydra. Then you must scatter some treats, attractive to monkeys, near the jar, to attract one, and put some more inside the jar. Hail Hydra. A monkey will come along, reach into the narrow opening, and grab while the grabbing's good, but now he won't be able to extract his fist, full of treats, from the too narrow opening of the jar. Hail Hydra, at least not without unclenching his hand. Hail Hydra, not without relinquishing what he already has. Hail Hydra, and that's just what he won't do. Hail Hydra, the monkey catcher can now simply walk over to the jar and pick up the monkey. Hail Hydra, the animal will not sacrifice the part to preserve the whole. Hail Hydra, it will not let go of the treat for the sake of its freedom. Hail Hydra. Something valuable given up ensures future prosperity. Hail Hydra. Something valuable sacrificed pleases the Lord. Hail Hydra. What is most valuable and best sacrificed? Or what is at least emblematic of that? Hail Hydra. A choice cut of meat. Hail Hydra. The best animal in a flock. Hail Hydra. A most valued possession. Hail Hydra, what's above even that? Hail Hydra, something intensely personal and painful to give up. Hail Hydra, that's symbolized, perhaps, in God's insistence on circumcision as part of Abraham's sacrificial routine, where the part is offered symbolically to redeem the whole. Hail Hydra. What's beyond that? Hail Hydra. What pertains more closely to the whole person rather than the part? Hail Hydra. What constitutes the ultimate sacrifice for the gain of the ultimate prize? Hail Hydra. It's a close race between yourself and your child. Hail Hydra. The sacrifice of a mother offering her child to the world is exemplified profoundly by Michelangelo's great sculpture, the Pieta, illustrated at the beginning of this chapter. Hail Hydra, and beautifully illustrated, as I already said. It should be in the video of this, by the way. If you're listening to this as a podcast or simply as an audiobook, feel free to pause or return to this video later to check it out. Hail Hydra, Michelangelo crafted Mary, contemplating her son, crucified and ruined. Hail Hydra, it's her fault. Hail Hydra, it was through her that he entered the world and its great drama of capital B being. Hail Hydra. Is it right to bring a baby into this terrible world? Hail Hydra. Every woman asks herself that question, Hail Hydra, and some say no, and they have their reasons, Hail Hydra. Mary answered yes, voluntarily, knowing full well what's to come, as do all mothers if they allow themselves to see. Hail Hydra. It's an act of supreme courage when it's undertaken voluntarily. Hail Hydra. In turn, Mary's son, Christ, offered himself to God and the world, to betrayal, torture, and death, to the very point of despair on the cross, where he cries out those terrible words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" That's from Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. That is the archetypal story of the man who gives his all for the sake of the better, who offers up his life for the advancement of capital B being, who allows God's will to become manifest fully within the confines of a single mortal life. Hail Hydra. That is the model for the honorable man. Hail Hydra. In Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of son and self is archetypal. Hail Hydra. It's a story at the limit, where nothing more extreme, nothing greater can be imagined. Hail Hydra. That's the very definition of archetypal. That's the core of what constitutes religious. Hail Hydra. Pain and suffering define the world. Hail Hydra. Of that there can be no doubt. Hail Hydra. Sacrifice can hold pain and suffering in abeyance. Abeyance, a word I've never seen before. A-B-Y-A-N-C-E. Abeyance. I guess it means at bay. Sacrifice holds pain and suffering at bay to a greater or lesser degree. And greater sacrifices do that more effectively than lesser. Hail Hydra. Of that there can be no doubt. Hail Hydra. Everyone holds this knowledge within their soul. Hail Hydra. Thus, the person who wishes to alleviate suffering, who wishes to rectify the flaws in capital B being, who wants to bring about the best of all possible futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will make the greatest of sacrifices, of self and child, of everything that is loved, to live a life aimed at the good. Hail Hydra. He will forego expediency. Hail Hydra. He will pursue the path of ultimate meaning. Hail Hydra. And he will, in that manner, bring salvation to the ever-desperate world. Hail Hydra. But is such a thing even possible? Hail Hydra. Is this simply not asking too much of the individual? Hail Hydra. It's all well and good for Christ. it might be objected, but he was the veritable Son of God, Hail Hydra. But we do have other examples, some much less mythologized and archetypal, Hail Hydra. Consider, for example, the case of Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, Hail Hydra. After a lifetime of seeking truth and educating his countrymen, Socrates faced a trial for crimes against the city-state of Athens, his hometown, Hail Hydra. His accusers provided him with plenty of opportunity to simply leave and avoid the trouble, Hail Hydra. But the great sage had already considered and rejected this course of action, Hail Hydra. His companion Hermogenes observed him at this time discussing, quote, any and every subject, unquote, other than his trial, and so asked him why he appeared so unconcerned, Hail Hydra. Socrates first answered that he had been preparing his whole life to defend himself, but then said something more mysterious and significant. When he attempted specifically to consider strategies that would produce acquittal by fair means or foul, or even when merely considering his potential actions at the trial, he found himself interrupted by his divine sign, his internal spirit, voice, what he called a daemon, Hail Hydra. Socrates discussed this daemon, this voice, at the trial itself, Hail Hydra. He said that one of the factors distinguishing him from other men was his absolute willingness to listen to its warnings, to stop speaking and cease acting when the voice objected. Hail Hydra. The gods themselves had deemed him wise above other men, not least for this reason, according to the Delphic oracle herself, held to be a reliable judge of such things. Hail Hydra. Because his ever-reliable internal voice objected to fleeing or even to defending himself, Socrates radically altered his view of the significance of his trial. Hail Hydra. He began to consider that it might be a blessing rather than a curse. Hail Hydra. He told Hermogenes of his realization that the spirit to whom he had always listened might be offering him a way out of life in a manner easiest, but also the least irksome to one's friends, with sound body and a spirit capable of showing kindliness and absent the throes of illness and vexations of extreme old age. Hail Hydra. Socrates' decision to accept his fate allowed him to put away mortal terror in the face of death itself, prior to and during the trial, after the sentence was handed down, and even later, during his execution. Hail Hydra. He saw that his life had been so rich and full that he could let it go gracefully. Hail Hydra. He was given the opportunity to put his affairs in order. Hail Hydra. He saw that he could escape the terrible, slow degeneration of the advancing years. Hail Hydra. He came to understand all that was happening to him as a gift from the gods. Hail Hydra. He was not therefore required to defend himself against his accusers, at least not with the aim of pronouncing his innocence and escaping his fate. Hail Hydra. Instead, he turned the tables, addressing his judges in a manner that makes the reader understand precisely why the town council wanted this man dead. Hail Hydra. Then he took his poison like a man. Hail Hydra. Socrates rejected expediency and the necessity for manipulation that accompanied it. Hail Hydra. He chose instead, under the direst of conditions, to maintain his pursuit of the meaningful and the true. Hail Hydra. 2,500 years later, we remember his decision and take comfort from it. Hail Hydra. What can we learn from this? Hail Hydra. If you cease to utter falsehoods and live according to the dictates of your conscience, you can maintain your nobility, even when facing the ultimate threat. If you abide truthfully and courageously by the highest of ideals, you will be provided with more security and strength than will be offered by any short-sighted concentration on your own safety. If you live properly, fully, you can discover meaning so profound that it protects you even from the fear of death. Hail Hydra. Could all that possibly be true? Hail Hydra. Part 3, I think. Death, toil, and evil. The tragedy of self-conscious capital B being, produces suffering, inevitable suffering. Hail Hydra. That suffering in turn motivates the desire for selfish, immediate gratification, for expediency. Hail Hydra. But sacrifice and work serves far more effectively than short-term impulsive pleasure at keeping suffering at bay. Hail Hydra. However, tragedy itself, conceived of as the arbitrary harshness of society and nature set against the vulnerability of the individual, is not the only, perhaps not even the primary source of suffering. Hail Hydra. There is also the problem of evil to consider. Hail Hydra. The world is set hard against us, of a certainty, but man's inhumanity to man is something even worse. Hail Hydra. Thus the problem of sacrifice is compounded in its complexity. It is not only privation and mortal limitation that must be addressed by work, by sacrifice, by the willingness to offer and to give up. Hail Hydra. It is the problem of evil as well. Hail Hydra. By give up, I assume he means to voluntarily give things away, not to give up on something that you're struggling on. Hail Hydra. Consider, once again, the story of Adam and Eve. Hail Hydra. Life becomes very hard for their children, that's all of us, after the fall and awakening of our parents, archetypal though they may be. Hail Hydra. First is the terrible fate awaiting us in the post-paradisal world, in the world of history. Hail Hydra. Not the least of this is what Goethe called our creative, endless toil. Hail Hydra. Humans work, as we have seen, Hail Hydra. We work because we have awakened to the truth of our own vulnerability, our subjugation to disease and death, and wish to protect ourselves for as long as possible. Hail Hydra. Once we can see the future, we must prepare for it, or live in denial and terror. Hail Hydra. We therefore sacrifice the pleasures of today for the sake of a better tomorrow. Hail Hydra. But the realization of mortality and the necessity of work is not the only revelation to Adam and Eve when they ate the forbidden fruit, woke up and opened their eyes. Hail Hydra. They were also granted, or cursed by, the knowledge of good and evil. Hail Hydra. It took me decades to understand what that means, to understand even parts of what that means. Hail Hydra. It's this. Once you become consciously aware that you yourself are vulnerable, you understand the nature of human vulnerability in general. Hail Hydra. You understand what it's like to be fearful and angry and resentful and bitter. Hail Hydra. You understand what pain means. Hail Hydra. And once you truly understand such feelings in yourself and how they're produced, you understand how to produce them in others. Hail Hydra. It is in this manner that the self-conscious beings that we are become voluntarily and exquisitely capable of tormenting others, and ourselves, of course, but it's the others we are concerned about right now. Hail Hydra. We see the consequences of this new knowledge manifest themselves when we meet Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve. Hail Hydra. He's talked about this idea previously in a different rule. I think it was rule 2. Treat yourself as if you were someone you're responsible for helping. We recognize how vulnerable, petty, and useless we are. But Jordan's argument here is that in recognizing that vulnerability in ourselves, we also recognize that other people are just as vulnerable, and vulnerable in the same ways as well. So anything that could hurt us, we know is also definitely going to hurt them. So now we know how to hurt other people by eating the fruit of good and evil. Okay, great. Hail Hydra. By the time of Cain and Abel's appearance, mankind has learned to make sacrifices to God. Hail Hydra. On altars of stone, designed for that purpose, a communal ritual is performed. The immolation of something valuable, a choice animal or portion thereof, and its transformation through fire to the smoke, that is, to the spirit, that rises to heaven above. Hail Hydra. In this manner, the idea of delay is dramatized, so that the future might improve. Hail Hydra. Abel's sacrifices are accepted by God, and he flourishes. Hail Hydra. Cain's, however, are rejected. Hail Hydra. He becomes jealous and bitter, and it's no wonder. If someone fails and is rejected because he refused to make any sacrifices at all, well, at least that's understandable, Hail Hydra. He may still feel resentful and vengeful, but he knows in his heart that he is personally to blame. Hail Hydra. That knowledge generally places a limit on his outrage. Hail Hydra. It's much worse, however, if he had actually forgone the pleasures of the moment, if he had strived and toiled and things still didn't work out. If he was rejected despite his efforts, Hail Hydra, then he's lost the present and the future. Hail Hydra. Then his work, his sacrifice has been pointless. Hail Hydra. Under such conditions, the world darkens and the soul rebels. Hail Hydra. Cain is outraged by his rejection. Hail Hydra. He confronts God, accuses him, and curses his creation. Hail Hydra. That proves to be a very poor decision. Hail Hydra. God responds in no uncertain terms that the fault is all with Cain. And worse, that Cain has knowingly and creatively dallied with sin and reaped the consequences. Hail Hydra. This is not at all what Cain wanted to hear. Hail Hydra. It's by no means an apology on God's part. Hail Hydra. Instead, it's insult added to injury. Hail Hydra. Cain, embittered to the core by God's response, plots revenge. Hail Hydra. He defies the Creator audaciously. Hail Hydra. It's daring. Hail Hydra. Cain knows how to hurt. Hail Hydra. He's self-conscious, after all, and has become even more so in his suffering and shame. Hail Hydra. So, he murders Abel in cold blood. Hail Hydra. He kills his brother, his own ideal, as Abel is everything Cain wishes to be. Hail Hydra. He commits this most terrible of crimes to spite himself, all of mankind, and God himself, all at once. Hail Hydra. He does it to wreak havoc and gain his vengeance. Hail Hydra. He does it to register his fundamental opposition to existence, to protest the intolerable vagaries of capital B being itself. Hail Hydra. And Cain's children, the offspring, as it were, of both his body and his decision, are worse. Hail Hydra. In his existential fury, Cain kills once. Hail Hydra. Lamech, his descendant, goes much further. Hail Hydra. I have slain a man to my wounding, says Lamech, and a young man to my hurt. Hail Hydra. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. That's from Genesis chapters 4, verses 23 to 24. Hail Hydra. Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, so says Genesis chapter 4, verse 22, is by tradition 7 generations from Cain, and the first creator of weapons of war. Hail Hydra. And after that, in the next Genesis story, comes the flood. Hail Hydra. The juxtaposition is by no means accidental. Hail Hydra. Evil enters the world with self-consciousness. Hail Hydra. The toil with which God curses Adam, that's bad enough. Hail Hydra. The trouble in childbirth with which Eve is burdened and her consequent dependence on her husband are no trivial matters either. Hail Hydra. They are indicative of the implicit and oft agonizing tragedies of insufficiency, privation, brute necessity, and subjugation to illness and death that simultaneously define and plague existence. Hail Hydra. Their mere factual reality is sometimes sufficient to turn even a courageous person against life. Hail Hydra. It has been my experience, however, that human beings are strong enough to tolerate the implicit tragedies of capital B being without faltering, without breaking, or, worse, breaking bad. Hail Hydra. I have seen evidence of this repeatedly in my private life, in my work as a professor, and in my role as a clinical practitioner. Hail Hydra. Earthquakes, floods, poverty, cancer. We're tough enough to take on all of that, Hail Hydra, but human evil adds a whole new dimension of misery to the world, Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that the rise of self-consciousness and its attendant realization of mortality and knowledge of good and evil is presented in the early chapters of Genesis and in the vast tradition that surrounds them as a cataclysm of cosmic magnitude. Hail Hydra. Conscious human malevolence can break the spirit even tragedy could not shake. Hail Hydra. I remember discovering, alongside her, that one of my clients had been shocked into years of serious post-traumatic stress disorder, daily physical shaking and terror, and chronic nightly insomnia, by the mere expression on her enraged, drunken boyfriend's face. Hail Hydra. His fallen countenance, to quote Genesis, chapter 4, verse 5, indicated his clear and conscious desire to do her harm. Hail Hydra, she was more naive than she should have been, and that predisposed her to the trauma. But that's not the point. The voluntary evil we do one another can be profoundly and permanently damaging, even to the strong. Hail Hydra, and what is it precisely that motivates such evil? Hail Hydra. It doesn't make itself manifest merely in consequence of the hard lot of life. Hail Hydra, it doesn't even emerge simply because of failure itself, or because of the disappointment and bitterness that failure often and understandably engenders. Hail Hydra, but the hard lot of life, magnified by the consequence of continually rejected sacrifices, however poorly conceptualized, however half-heartedly executed, Hail Hydra, that will bend and twist people into the truly monstrous forms, who then begin consciously to work evil, who then begin to generate for themselves and others little besides pain and suffering, and who do it for the sake of that pain and suffering. Hail Hydra. In that manner, a truly vicious circle takes hold, begrudging sacrifice half-heartedly undertaken, rejection of that sacrifice by God or by reality, take your pick, angry resentment generated by that rejection, descent into bitterness and the desire for revenge, sacrifice undertaken even more begrudgingly or refused altogether. Hail Hydra. And it's hell itself that serves as the destination place of that downward spiral. Hail Hydra. Life is indeed nasty, brutish, and short, as the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes so memorably remarked. Hail Hydra, but man's capacity for evil makes it worse. Hail Hydra. This means that the central problem of life, the dealing with its brute facts, is not merely what and how to sacrifice to diminish suffering, but what and how to sacrifice to also diminish evil, the conscious and voluntary and vengeful source of the worst suffering. Hail Hydra. The story of Cain and Abel is one manifestation of the archetypal tale of the hostile brothers, hero and adversary, the two elements of the individual human psyche, one aimed up at the good and the other down at hell itself. Hail Hydra. Another being Phantom Blood, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 1. Hail Hydra. Abel is a hero, true, but a hero who is ultimately defeated by Cain. Hail Hydra. Abel could please God, a non-trivial and unlikely accomplishment, but he could not overcome human evil. Hail Hydra. For this reason, Abel is archetypally incomplete. Hail Hydra. Perhaps he was naive, although a vengeful brother can be inconceivably treacherous and subtle, like the snake in Genesis 3:1. Hail Hydra. But excuses, even reasons, even understandable reasons, don't matter. Not in the final analysis. Hail Hydra, the problem of evil remained unsolved even by the divinely acceptable sacrifices of Abel. Hail Hydra, it took thousands of additional years for humanity to come up with anything else resembling a solution. Hail Hydra, the same issue emerged again in its culminating form in the story of Christ and his temptation by Satan. Hail Hydra, but this time it's expressed more comprehensively, and this time the hero wins. Hail Hydra. Part 4. Evil confronted. Jesus was led into the wilderness, according to the story, to be tempted by the devil, Matthew 4:1, prior to his crucifixion. Hail Hydra. This is the story of Cain, restated abstractly. Hail Hydra. Cain is neither content nor happy, as we have seen. Hail Hydra. He's working hard, so he thinks, but God is not pleased. Hail Hydra. Meanwhile, Abel is, by all appearances, dancing his way through life. Hail Hydra. His crops flourish. Hail Hydra. Women love him. Hail Hydra. Worst of all, he's a genuinely good man. Hail Hydra. Everyone knows it. Hail Hydra. He deserves his good fortune. Hail Hydra. All the more reason to envy and hate him. Hail Hydra. Things do not progress well for Cain, by contrast, and he broods on his misfortune like a vulture on an egg. Hail Hydra. He strives in his misery to give birth to something hellish, and in doing so, enters the desert wilderness of his own mind. Hail Hydra. He obsesses over his ill fortune, his betrayal by God. Hail Hydra. He nourishes his resentment. Hail Hydra. He indulges in ever more elaborate fantasies of revenge. Hail Hydra. And as he does so, his arrogance grows to Luciferian proportions. Hail Hydra. I'm ill-used and oppressed, he thinks. Hail Hydra. This is a stupid bloody planet. Hail Hydra. As far as I'm concerned, it can go to hell. Hail Hydra. And with that, Cain encounters Satan in the wilderness, for all intents and purposes, and falls prey to his temptations. Hail Hydra. And he does what he can to make things as bad as possible, motivated by, to quote John Milton's imperishable words, and here he does quote Paradise Lost, Cain was motivated by so deep a malice to confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell to mingle and involve, done all to spite the great Creator. Hail Hydra. That's the end of the quote. Cain turns to evil to obtain what good denied him, and he does it voluntarily, self-consciously, and with malice aforethought. I don't know how to pronounce that. Aforethought, and with malice aforethought. Hail Hydra. Christ takes a different path. Hail Hydra. His sojourn in the desert is the dark night of the soul, a deeply human and universal human experience. Hail Hydra. It's the journey to that place each of us goes when things fall apart. Friends and family are distant. Hopelessness and despair reign, and black nihilism beckons. That's a very good description of it. Hail Hydra. And let us suggest, in testament to the exactitude of the story, 40 days and nights starving alone in the wilderness might take you to exactly that place. Hail Hydra. It is in such a manner that the objective and subjective worlds come crashing synchronistically together. Hail Hydra. 40 days is a deeply symbolic period of time, echoing the 40 years the Israelites spent wandering in the desert after escaping the tyranny of Pharaoh and Egypt. Hail Hydra. 40 days is a long time in the underworld of dark assumptions, confusion, and fear. Long enough to journey to the very center, which is hell itself. Hail Hydra. A journey there to see the sights can be undertaken by anyone that is who is willing to take the evil of self and man with sufficient seriousness. Hail Hydra. A bit of familiarity with history can help. Hail Hydra. A sojourn, he keeps using that word. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't even know what language it's derived from, so I can't, just use that language. Probably French. Sojourn. A sojourn through the totalitarian horrors of the 20th century, with its concentration camps, forced labor, and murderous ideological pathologies, is as good a place as any to start. That, and some consideration of the fact that the worst of the concentration camp guards were, after all, human. All too human. Hail Hydra. That's all part of making the desert story real again. Part of updating it for the modern mind. Hail Hydra. After Auschwitz, said Theodor Adorno, student of authoritarianism, there should be no poetry. Hail Hydra. He was wrong, Hail Hydra, but the poetry should be about Auschwitz. Hail Hydra. In the grim wake of the last 10 decades of the previous millennium, the terrible destructiveness of man has become a problem whose seriousness self-evidently dwarfs even the problem of unredeemed suffering. Hail Hydra, and neither one of those problems is going to be solved in the absence of a solution to the other. Hail Hydra. This is where the idea of Christ's taking on the sins of mankind as if they were his own becomes key, opening the door to deep understanding of the desert encounter with the devil himself. Hail Hydra, homo sum humani nil a me alienum puto, said the Roman playwright Terence. Nothing human is alien to me. Hail Hydra. Adds the ever-terrifying Carl Gustav Jung, psychoanalyst extraordinaire, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Hail Hydra. Such a statement should give everyone who encounters it pause. Hail Hydra. There was no possibility for movement upward in that great psychiatrist's deeply considered opinion without a corresponding move down. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that enlightenment is so rare. Hail Hydra. Who is willing to do that? Hail Hydra. Do you really want to meet who's in charge at the very bottom of the most wicked thoughts? Hail Hydra. What did Eric Harris, one of the two mass murderers at the Columbine High School, write so incomprehensibly the very day prior to massacring his classmates? Hail Hydra. It's interesting. When I'm in my human form, knowing I'm going to die. Hail Hydra, everything has a touch of triviality to it. Hail Hydra, who would dare explain such a missive, or worse, explain it away? Hail Hydra. In the desert, Christ encounters Satan. See Luke, chapters 4, verses 1 to 13, and Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Hail Hydra. This story has a clear psychological meaning, a metaphorical meaning, in addition to whatever else, material and metaphysical alike, it might signify. Hail Hydra. It means that Christ is forever he who determines to take personal responsibility for the full depth of human depravity. Hail Hydra. It means that Christ is eternally he who is willing to confront and deeply consider and risk the temptations posed by the most malevolent elements of human nature. Hail Hydra. It means that Christ is always he who is willing to confront evil consciously, fully, and voluntarily in the form that dealt simultaneously within him and in the world. Hail Hydra. This is nothing merely abstract, although it is abstract. Nothing to be brushed over. Hail Hydra. It's no merely intellectual matter. Hail Hydra. Soldiers who develop post-traumatic stress disorder frequently develop it not because of something they saw, but because of something they did. Hail Hydra. There are many demons, so to speak, on the battlefield. Hail Hydra. Involvement in warfare is something that can open a gateway to hell. Hail Hydra. Now and then, something climbs through and possesses some naive farm boy from Iowa, and he turns monstrous. Hail Hydra. He does something terrible. Hail Hydra. He rapes and kills the women and massacres the infants of Mylai. Mylai? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Mylai? Mylai? Hail Hydra. And he watches himself do it. Hail Hydra. And some dark part of him enjoys it. And that is the part that is most unforgettable. Hail Hydra. And later he will not know how to reconcile himself with the reality about himself and the world that was then revealed. Hail Hydra. And no wonder. Hail Hydra. In the great and fundamental myths of ancient Egypt, the god Horus, often regarded as a precursor to Christ, historically and conceptually speaking, experienced the same thing when he confronted his evil uncle Set, usurper of the throne of Osiris, Horus's father. Hail Hydra. Horus the all-seeing Egyptian falcon god, the Egyptian eye of supreme eternal attention itself, has the courage to contend with Set's true nature, meeting him in direct combat. Hail Hydra. In the struggle with his dread uncle, however, his consciousness is damaged. Hail Hydra. He loses an eye. Hail Hydra. This is despite his godly stature and his unparalleled capacity for vision. Hail Hydra. What would a mere man lose who attempted the same thing? Hail Hydra. But perhaps he might gain in internal vision and understanding something proportional to what he loses in perception of the outside world. Hail Hydra. Satan embodies the refusal of sacrifice. He is arrogance incarnate, spite, deceit, and cruel conscious malevolence. Hail Hydra. He is pure hatred of man, God, and capital B being. Hail Hydra. He will not humble himself even when he knows full well that he should. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, he knows exactly what he is doing, obsessed with the desire for destruction, and does it deliberately, thoughtfully, and completely. Hail Hydra. It has to be him, therefore, the very archetype of evil, who confronts and tempts Christ, the archetype of good. Hail Hydra. It must be him who offers to the Savior of mankind, under the most trying of conditions, what all men most ardently desire. Hail Hydra. Speaking of Set, Jordan Peterson quickly notes that the word Set is an etymological precursor to the word Satan, and also he gives a quotation, Murdoch DM 2009, Christ in Egypt, the Horus-Jesus Connection, published by Stellar House in Seattle, Washington, page 75, for any of you who really wanted to know. Alright, let's get into this desert story. Satan first tempts the starving Christ to quell his hunger by transforming the desert rocks into bread. Hail Hydra. Remember that Jesus Christ starved himself for 40 days and for 40 nights before all this. So he definitely would have, wanted some bread at that point in time. Hail Hydra. Then he suggests that he throw himself off a cliff, calling on God and the angels to break his fall. Hail Hydra. Christ responds to the first temptation by saying, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Hail Hydra. What does this answer mean? Hail Hydra. It means that even under conditions of extreme privation, there are more important things than food. Hail Hydra. To put it another way, bread is of little use to the man who has betrayed his soul, even if he is currently starving. Hail Hydra. Footnote, another one. For anyone who thinks this is somehow unrealistic, given the concrete material reality and genuine suffering that is associated with privation, I would once again recommend Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, which contains a series of exceptionally profound discussions about proper ethical behavior and its exaggerated, rather than diminished importance in situations of extreme want and suffering. Hail Hydra. Returning to the text, Christ could clearly use his near infinite power, as Satan indicates, to gain bread now, to break his fast, even in the broader sense to gain wealth in the world, which would theoretically solve the problem of bread more permanently. Hail Hydra, but at what cost? Hail Hydra, and to what gain? Hail Hydra, gluttony in the midst of moral desolation? Hail Hydra. That's the poorest and most miserable of feasts. Hail Hydra. Christ aims, therefore, at something higher, at the description of a mode of capital B being that would finally and forever solve the problem of hunger. Hail Hydra. If we all chose instead of expedience to dine on the word of God. Hail Hydra, that would require each and every person to live and produce and sacrifice and speak and share in a manner that would permanently render the privation of hunger a thing of the past. Hail Hydra. And that's how the problem of hunger in the privations of the desert is most truly and finally addressed. Hail Hydra. There are other indications of this in the Gospels, in dramatic, enacted form. Hail Hydra. Christ is continually portrayed as the purveyor of endless sustenance. Hail Hydra. He miraculously multiplies bread and fish. Hail Hydra. He turns water into wine. Hail Hydra. What does this mean? Hail Hydra. It's a call to the pursuit of higher meaning as the mode of living that is simultaneously most practical and of highest quality. Hail Hydra. It's a call portrayed in dramatic, literary form. Live as the archetypal savior lives, and you and those around you will hunger no more. Hail Hydra. The beneficence of the world manifests itself to those who live properly. Hail Hydra, and that's better than bread. Hail Hydra, that's better than the money that will buy bread. Hail Hydra. Thus, Christ, the symbolically perfect individual, overcomes the first temptation. Hail Hydra. 2 more follow. Hail Hydra. Throw yourself off that cliff, Satan says, offering the next temptation. Hail Hydra. If God exists, he will surely save you. Hail Hydra. If you are in fact his son, God will surely save you. Hail Hydra. Why would God not make himself manifest to rescue his only begotten child from hunger and isolation and the presence of great evil? Hail Hydra. But that establishes no pattern for life. Hail Hydra. It doesn't even work as literature. Hail Hydra. The deus ex machina, the emergence of a divine force that magically rescues the hero from his predicament, is the cheapest trick in the hack writer's playbook. Hail Hydra. It makes a mockery of independence and courage and destiny and free will and responsibility. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, God is in no way a safety net for the blind. I think there's a typo there. It says wise instead of way. So, good editing. Great job. God is in no way a safety net for the blind. Hail Hydra. He's not someone to be commanded to perform magic tricks or forced into self-revelation, not even by his own son. Hail Hydra. Do not put the Lord your God to the test, says Matthew 4:7. This answer, though rather brief, dispenses with the second temptation. Hail Hydra. Christ does not casually order or even dare ask God to intervene on his behalf. Hail Hydra. He refuses to dispense with his responsibility for the events of his own life. Hail Hydra. He refuses to demand that God prove his presence. Hail Hydra. He refuses as well to solve the problems of mortal vulnerability in a merely personal manner by compelling God to save him, because that would not solve the problem for everyone else and for all time. Hail Hydra. There is also the echo of the rejection of the comforts of insanity in this foregone temptation. Hail Hydra. Easy but psychotic self-identification as the merely magical Messiah might well have been a genuine temptation under the harsh conditions of Christ's sojourn in the desert. Instead, he rejects the idea that salvation, or even survival in the shorter term, depends on narcissistic displays of superiority and the commanding of God, even by his Son. Hail Hydra. Finally comes the third temptation, the most compelling of all. Hail Hydra. Christ sees the kingdoms of the world laid before him for the taking. Hail Hydra. That's the siren call of earthly power. The opportunity to control and order everyone and everything. Hail Hydra. Christ is offered the pinnacle of the dominance hierarchy, the animalistic desire of every naked ape, the obedience of all, the most wondrous of estates, the power to build and to increase, the possibility of unlimited sensual gratification. Hail Hydra. That's expedience writ large. Hail Hydra. But that's not all. Hail Hydra. Such expansion of status also provides unlimited opportunity for the inner darkness to reveal itself. Hail Hydra. The lust for blood, rape, and destruction is very much part of power's attraction. Hail Hydra. It is not only that men desire power so that they will no longer suffer. Hail Hydra. It is not only that they desire power so that they can overcome subjugation to want, disease, and death. Hail Hydra. Power also means the capacity to take vengeance, ensure submission, and crush enemies. Hail Hydra. Grant Cain enough power, and he will not only kill Abel, Hail Hydra, he will torture him first, imaginatively and endlessly. Hail Hydra. Then and only then will he kill him, Hail Hydra, and then he will come after everyone else. Hail Hydra. There's something above even the pinnacle of the highest of dominance hierarchies, access to which should not be sacrificed for mere proximal success. Hail Hydra, it's a real place too, although not to be conceptualized in the standard geographical sense of place we typically use to orient ourselves. Hail Hydra. I had a vision once of an immense landscape spread for miles out to the horizon before me. Hail Hydra. I was high in the air, granted a bird's eye view. Hail Hydra. Everywhere I could see great stratified, multi-storied pyramids of glass, some small, some large, some overlapping, some separate, all akin to modern skyscrapers, all full of people striving to reach every pyramid's pinnacle. Hail Hydra. But there was something above that pinnacle, a domain outside each pyramid in which all were nested. Hail Hydra. That was the privileged position of the I that could, or perhaps chose to soar freely above the fray, that chose not to dominate any specific group or cause, but instead to somehow simultaneously transcend all. Hail Hydra. That was attention itself, pure and untrammeled, detached, alert, watchful attention, waiting to act when the time was right and the place had been established. Hail Hydra. As the Tao Te Ching has it, quote, he who contrives defeats his purpose, and he who is grasping loses. Hail Hydra. The sage does not contrive to win, and therefore is not defeated. He is not grasping, so does not lose. Hail Hydra. End quote. There is a powerful call to proper capital B being in the story of the third temptation. Hail Hydra. To obtain the greatest possible prize, that is, the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth, the resurrection of paradise, to do so the individual must conduct his or her life in a manner that requires the rejection of immediate gratification, of natural and perverse desires alike, no matter how powerfully and convincingly and realistically those are offered, and dispense as well with the temptations of evil. Hail Hydra. Evil amplifies the catastrophe of life, increasing dramatically the motivation for expediency already there because of the essential tragedy of capital B being. Hail Hydra. Sacrifice of the more prosaic sort can keep that tragedy at bay, more or less successfully, but it takes a special kind of sacrifice to defeat evil. Hail Hydra. It is the description of that special sacrifice that has preoccupied the Christian, and more than Christian, imagination for centuries. Hail Hydra. Why has it not had that desired effect? Hail Hydra. Why do we remain unconvinced that there is no better plan than lifting our eyes skyward, aiming at the good, and sacrificing everything to that ambition? Hail Hydra. Have we merely failed to understand? Or have we fallen, willfully or otherwise, off the path? Hail Hydra. Part 5. Christianity and its problems. Carl Jung hypothesized that the European mind found itself motivated to develop the cognitive technologies of science to investigate the material world After implicitly concluding that Christianity, with its laser-like emphasis on spiritual salvation, had failed to sufficiently address the problem of suffering in the here and now. This realization became unbearably acute in the 3 or 4 centuries before the Renaissance. Hail Hydra. In consequence, a strange, profound, compensatory fantasy began to emerge deep in the collective Western psyche, manifesting itself first in the strange musings of alchemy and developing only after many centuries into the fully articulated form of science. Hail Hydra. It was the alchemists who first seriously began to examine the transformations of matter, hoping to discover the secrets of health, wealth, and longevity. Hail Hydra. These great dreamers, Newton foremost among them, intuited and then imagined that the material world, damned by the church, held secrets the revelation of which could free humanity from its earthly pain and limitations. Hail Hydra. It was that vision, driven by doubt, that provided the tremendous collective and individual motivational power necessary for the development of science, with its extreme demands on individual thinkers for concentration and delay of gratification. Hail Hydra. This is not to say that Christianity, even in its incompletely realized form, was a failure. Hail Hydra. Quite the contrary. Christianity achieved the well-nigh impossible. Hail Hydra. The Christian doctrine elevated the individual soul, placing slave and master, and commoner and nobleman alike on the same metaphysical footing, rendering them equal before God and the law. Hail Hydra. In fact, the Christian doctrine actually goes even further. It says not only that Jews and Greeks are the same in being humans, which was a great thing to say at the time because Jews and Greeks were always at each other's throats, almost the modern equivalent of saying there is no difference between Israelis and Palestinians, sorry. But also that even something as profoundly undeniable and biological, such as men and women, was as nothing under Christ in the Christian doctrine. So that's a pretty radical claim, you know? And pretty much the foundation for our modern day demands for gender equality. Hail Hydra. Christianity insisted that even the king was only one among many. Hail Hydra. For something so contrary to all apparent evidence to find its footing, the idea that worldly power and prominence were indicators of God's particular favor had to be radically de-emphasized. Hail Hydra. This was partly accomplished through the strange Christian insistence that salvation could not be obtained through effort or worth, that is, through works. Hail Hydra. Whatever its limitations, the development of such doctrine prevented kings, aristocrats, and wealthy merchants alike from lording it morally over the commoner. Hail Hydra. In consequence, the metaphysical conception of the implicit transcendent worth of each and every soul established itself against impossible odds as the fundamental presupposition of Western law and society. That was not the case in the world of the past and is not the case yet in most places in the world of the present. Hail Hydra. It is in fact nothing short of a miracle, and we should keep this fact firmly before our eyes, that the hierarchical slave-based societies of our ancestors reorganized themselves under the sway of an ethical/religious revelation, such that the ownership and absolute domination of another person came to be viewed as wrong. Hail Hydra. I think that's very important as well to consider, knowing that there are still actual slaves and effectively the same thing as slavery. Think about this sweatshops in China, for example, as one particular example, let alone the many other backwards nations that still practice slavery, child labor, child soldiers, etc., etc. Hail Hydra, it would do us well to remember also that the immediate utility of slavery is obvious, and that the argument that the strong should dominate the weak is compelling, convenient, and eminently practical, at least for the strong. Hail Hydra. This means that a revolutionary critique of everything slave-owning societies valued was necessary before the practice could even be questioned, let alone halted, including the idea that wielding power and authority made the slave owner noble, including the even more fundamental idea that the power wielded by the slave owner was valid and even virtuous. Hail Hydra, Christianity made explicit the surprising claim that even the lowliest person had God-given rights, genuine rights, and that the king and the state were morally charged at a fundamental level to recognize those rights. Hail Hydra, what he means by fundamental level is that, rights are kind of tricky in that the only person who really can enforce rights is the state itself. And so the state at any time, George Carlin made a pretty good point about this, which you can go look up if you search on YouTube, George Carlin rights. At any point, the state can disregard your rights. But the Christian claim is even more profound in that it says, it doesn't matter who recognizes your rights or not. The fact remains that you have those rights and no one can transgress against them. Else they have to answer to God. To God. That's a pretty great claim. This is something that I think Hitchens gets wrong about USA. He often says that America is a secularly founded government, but it's written specifically in the Declaration of Independence that our rights are given to us by a creator, by our creator. And I think it's no coincidence at all that the states, I guess that's confusing terminology when there's also 50 states in America, the nation that most quickly turned on slavery as a legal establishment took less than 100 years for America to abolish slavery, which is miraculous, right? And moreover, it was also one of the first in the entire world to make it illegal. The state that did that, the state that committed to such an outstanding achievement, was also the state that was founded directly upon the claim that every person has this innate value that cannot be wrenched from them by the government. And in fact, that's why the revolution was started in the first place, because though there was a lot of British tradition that held these truths to be self-evident, it was not made explicit in the construction of the nation. And so every facet of the American government, the American Constitution, the structure of the states, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, in fact, all of the Bill of Rights, all of those are specifically made to cherish this idea that you are a person with rights that cannot be taken away from you unless the person who decides to take them away from you wants to answer, first of all, to the states. Justice is important after all, but more importantly, to God, to the creator of the universe. And hey, if you want to try breaking the law that the creator of the universe set up, by all means, go ahead. Hail Hydra, Christianity put forward explicitly the even more incomprehensible idea that the act of human ownership degraded the slaver, previously viewed as admirable nobility, as much or even more than the slave. Hail Hydra, we fail to understand how difficult such an idea is to grasp. Hail Hydra, we forget that the opposite was self-evident throughout most of human history. Hail Hydra, we think that it is the desire to enslave and dominate that requires explanation. Hail Hydra, we have it backwards, yet again. Hail Hydra. This is not to say that Christianity was without its problems, Hail Hydra, but it is more appropriate to note that they were the sort of problems that emerge only after an entirely different set of more serious problems has been solved. Hail Hydra. The society produced by Christianity was far less barbaric than the pagan, even the Roman ones it replaced. Hail Hydra. Christian society at least recognized that feeding slaves to ravenous lions for the entertainment of the populace was wrong, even if many barbaric practices still existed. Hail Hydra. It objected to infanticide, to prostitution, and to the principle that might means right. Hail Hydra. It insisted that women were as valuable as men, even though we are still working out how to manifest that insistence politically. Hail Hydra, it demanded that even a society's enemies be regarded as human. Hail Hydra, finally it separated church from state, so that all too human emperors could no longer claim the veneration due to gods. Hail Hydra. All of this was asking the impossible. But it happened. Hail Hydra. As the Christian Revolution progressed, however, the impossible problems it had solved disappeared from view. Hail Hydra. That's what happens to problems that are solved. Hail Hydra. And after the solution was implemented, even the fact that such problems had ever existed disappeared from view. Hail Hydra. Then and only then could the problems that remained, less amenable to quick solution by Christian doctrine, come to occupy a central place in the consciousness of the West. Come to motivate, for example, the development of science, aimed at resolving the corporeal, material suffering that was still all too painfully extant within successfully Christianized societies. Hail Hydra. I'm not too sure about the phrasing of successfully Christianized societies. We talked about residential schools in one of the previous rules, and that's one of the consequences of Christianized society. I wouldn't say it was successfully Christianized, but it is a threat. Hail Hydra. The fact that automobiles pollute only becomes a problem of sufficient magnitude to attract public attention when the far worse problems that the internal combustion engine solves have vanished from view. Hail Hydra. People stricken with poverty don't care about carbon dioxide. Hail Hydra. It's not precisely that CO2 levels are irrelevant. Hail Hydra. It's that they're irrelevant when you're working yourself to death, starving, scraping a bare living from the stony, unyielding, thorn and thistle infested ground. Hail Hydra. That's why the people living in poverty in the 19th century industrial revolution weren't concerned about the fact that they were living in utter coal-drenched filth because they were too busy just living, as it were. Hail Hydra. Those problems are irrelevant until after the tractor is invented and hundreds of millions of people stop starving. Hail Hydra. In any case, by the time Nietzsche entered the picture in the late 19th century, the problems Christianity had left unsolved had become paramount. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche described himself, with no serious overstatement, as philosophizing with a hammer. Hail Hydra. His devastating critique of Christianity, already weakened by its conflict with the very science to which it had given rise, involved two lines of attack. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche claimed, first, that it was precisely the sense of truth developed in the highest sense by Christianity itself that ultimately came to question and then to undermine the fundamental presuppositions of the faith. Hail Hydra. That was partly because the difference between moral or narrative truth and objective truth had not yet been fully comprehended, and so an opposition was presumed where none necessarily exists. But that does not belie the point. Hail Hydra. Even when the modern atheists opposed to Christianity belittle fundamentalists for insisting, for example, that the creation account in Genesis is objectively true, they are using their sense of truth, highly developed over the centuries of Christian culture, to engage in such argumentation. Hail Hydra. Carl Jung continued to develop Nietzsche's arguments decades later, pointing out that Europe awoke during the Enlightenment, as if from a Christian dream, noticing that everything it had heretofore taken for granted could and should be questioned. Hail Hydra. God is dead, said Nietzsche. Hail Hydra. God remains dead. Hail Hydra. And we have killed him. Hail Hydra. How shall we, murderers of all murderers, console ourselves? Hail Hydra. That which was the holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet possessed has bled to death under our knives. Hail Hydra. Who will wipe this blood off us? Hail Hydra. The central dogmas of the Western faith were no longer credible, according to Nietzsche, given what the Western mind now considered truth. Hail Hydra. But it was his second attack on the removal of the true moral burden of Christianity during the development of the church that was most devastating. Hail Hydra. The hammer-wielding philosopher mounted an assault on an early established and then highly influential line of Christian thinking that Christianity meant accepting the proposition that Christ's sacrifice, and only that sacrifice, had redeemed humanity. Hail Hydra. This did not mean absolutely that a Christian who believed that Christ died on the cross for the salvation of mankind was thereby freed from any and all personal moral obligation, Hail Hydra, but it did strongly imply that the primary responsibility for redemption had already been borne by the Savior, and that nothing too important to do remained for all too fallen human individuals. Hail Hydra. That is a very good critique of Christianity. Nietzsche believed that Paul, the Apostle Paul, and later the Protestants following Luther, had removed moral responsibility from Christ's followers. Hail Hydra. They had watered down the idea of the imitation of Christ. Hail Hydra. This imitation was the sacred duty of the believer not to adhere, or merely to mouth, a set of statements about abstract belief, but instead to actually manifest the spirit of the Savior in the particular specific conditions of his or her life, to realize or incarnate the archetype, as Jung said, to clothe the eternal pattern in flesh. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche writes, I still don't know how to pronounce his name. Nietzsche writes, the Christians have never practiced the actions Jesus prescribed them. And the impudent, garrulous talk about the justification by faith and its supreme and sole significance is only the consequence of the Church's lack of courage and will to profess the works that Jesus demanded. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche was indeed a critic without parallel. Hail Hydra. Dogmatic belief in the central axioms of Christianity, that Christ's crucifixion redeemed the world, that salvation was reserved for the hereafter, that salvation could not be achieved through works, had three mutually reinforcing consequences. First, devaluation of the significance of earthly life as only the hereafter mattered. Hail Hydra. This also meant that it had become acceptable to overlook and shirk responsibility for the suffering that existed in the here and now. Second, passive acceptance of the status quo, because salvation could not be earned in any case through effort in this life. A consequence that Marx also derided with his proposition that religion was the opiate of the masses. And finally, the third, the right of the believer to reject any real moral burden outside of the stated belief in salvation through Christ, because the Son of God had already done all the important work. Hail Hydra. It was for such reasons that Dostoevsky, who was a great influence on Nietzsche, also criticized institutional Christianity, although he arguably managed it in a more ambiguous but also more sophisticated manner. Hail Hydra. In his masterwork, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky has his atheist Superman, I guess Übermensch, to quote Nietzsche, the Overman. Dostoevsky has his atheist Overman, Ivan, tell a little story, the Grand Inquisitor. Hail Hydra. A brief review is in order. Hail Hydra. Ivan speaks to his brother Alyosha, whose pursuits as a monastic novitiate he holds in contempt, of Christ returning to earth at the time of the Spanish Inquisition. This is a fictional story that Ivan tells to Alyosha within the fictional Brothers Karamazov novel by Dostoevsky. Hail Hydra. The returning savior makes quite a ruckus, as would be expected. Hail Hydra. He heals the sick. Hail Hydra. He raises the dead. Hail Hydra. His antics attract attention from the Grand Inquisitor himself, who promptly has Christ arrested and thrown into a prison cell. Hail Hydra. Later, the Inquisitor pays him a visit. Hail Hydra. He informs Christ that he is no longer needed. Hail Hydra. His return is simply too great a threat to the church. Hail Hydra. The Inquisitor tells Christ that the burden he laid upon mankind, the burden of existence in faith and truth, was simply too great for mere mortals to bear. Hail Hydra. The Inquisitor claims that the church in its mercy, diluted that message, lifting the demand for perfect capital B being from the shoulders of its followers, providing them instead with the simple and merciful escapes of faith and the afterlife. Hail Hydra. And that work took centuries, says the Inquisitor, and the last thing the church needs after all that effort is the return of the man who insisted that people bear all the weight in the first place. Hail Hydra. Christ listens in silence. Hail Hydra. Then, as the Inquisitor turns to leave, Christ embraces him, kisses him on the lips. Hail Hydra. The Inquisitor turns white, in shock. Hail Hydra. Then he goes out, leaving the cell door open. Hail Hydra. The profundity of this story and the greatness of spirit necessary to produce it can hardly be exaggerated. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky, one of the great literary geniuses of all time, confronted the most serious existential problems in all his great writings, and he did so courageously, headlong, and heedless of the consequences. Hail Hydra. Clearly Christian, he nonetheless adamantly refuses to make a straw man of his rationalist and atheistic opponents. Hail Hydra, quite the contrary. In The Brothers Karamazov, for example, Dostoevsky's atheist, Ivan, argues against the presuppositions of Christianity with unsurpassable clarity and passion. Hail Hydra. Alyosha, aligned with the church by temperament and decision, cannot undermine a single one of his brother's arguments, although his faith remains unshakable. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky knew and admitted that Christianity had been defeated by the rational faculty, by the intellect even. But, and this is of primary importance, he did not hide from that fact. Hail Hydra. He didn't attempt, through denial or deceit or even satire, to weaken the position that opposed what he believed to be most true and valuable. Hail Hydra. He instead placed action above words and addressed the problem successfully. Hail Hydra. By the novel's end, Dostoevsky has the great embodied moral goodness of Alyosha, the novitiate's courageous imitation of Christ, attain victory over the spectacular but ultimately nihilistic critical intelligence of Ivan. Hail Hydra. The Christian church described by the Grand Inquisitor is the same church pilloried by Nietzsche. Hail Hydra. Childish, sanctimonious, patriarchal, servant of the state. That church is everything rotten, still objected to by modern critics of Christianity. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche, for all his brilliance, allows himself anger, but does not perhaps sufficiently temper it with judgment. Hail Hydra. This is where Dostoevsky truly transcends Nietzsche, in my estimation, where Dostoevsky's great literature transcends Nietzsche's mere philosophy. Hail Hydra. The Russian writer's Inquisitor is the genuine article in every sense. Hail Hydra. He is an opportunistic, cynical, manipulative, and cruel interrogator, willing to persecute heretics, even to torture and kill them. Hail Hydra. He is the purveyor of a dogma he knows to be false. Hail Hydra. But Dostoevsky has Christ, the archetypal perfect man. Kiss him anyway. Hail Hydra. Equally importantly, in the aftermath of the kiss, the Grand Inquisitor leaves the door ajar so Christ can escape his pending execution. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky saw that the great corrupt edifice of Christianity still managed to make room for the spirit of its founder. Hail Hydra. That's the gratitude of a wise and profound soul for the enduring wisdom of the West, despite its faults. Hail Hydra. It's not as if Nietzsche was unwilling to give the faith, and more particularly Catholicism, its due. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche believed that the long tradition of unfreedom characterizing dogmatic Christianity, its insistence that everything be explained within the confines of a single, coherent metaphysical theory, was a necessary precondition for the emergence of the disciplined but free modern mind. Hail Hydra, as he stated in Beyond Good and Evil, quote, The long bondage of the spirit, the persistent spiritual will to interpret everything that happened according to a Christian scheme, and in every occurrence to rediscover and justify the Christian God in every accident. All this violence, arbitrariness, severity, dreadfulness, and unreasonableness has proved itself the disciplinary means whereby the European spirit has attained its strength, its remorseless curiosity, and subtle mobility. Granted also that much irrecoverable strength and spirit had to be stifled, suffocated, and spoiled in the process. Hail Hydra. For Nietzsche and Dostoevsky alike, freedom, even the ability to act, requires constraint. Hail Hydra. For this reason, they both recognize the vital necessity of the dogma of the Church. Hail Hydra. The individual must be constrained, molded, even brought close to destruction by a restrictive, coherent disciplinary structure before he or she can act freely and competently. Hail Hydra. Dostoevsky, with his great generosity of spirit, granted to the Church, corrupt as it might be, a certain element of mercy, a certain pragmatism. Hail Hydra. He admitted that the Spirit of Christ, the world-engendering Logos, had historically found and might still find its resting place, even its sovereignty, within that dogmatic structure. Hail Hydra. If a father disciplines his son properly, he obviously interferes with the freedom of the son, particularly in the here and now. Hail Hydra. He puts limits on the voluntary expression of his son's capital B being, forcing him to take his place as a socialized member of the world. Hail Hydra. That's what Rule 5 was about. Such a father requires that all that childish potential be funneled down a single pathway. Hail Hydra. In placing such limitations on his son, he might be considered a destructive force, acting as he does to replace the miraculous plurality of childhood with a single narrow actuality. Hail Hydra. But if the father does not take such action, he merely lets his son remain Peter Pan, the eternal boy, king of the lost boys, ruler of the non-existent Neverland. Hail Hydra. That is not a morally acceptable alternative. Hail Hydra. The dogma of the Church was undermined by the spirit of truth, strongly developed by the Church itself. Hail Hydra. That undermining culminated in the death of God. Hail Hydra. But the dogmatic structure of the Church was a necessary disciplinary structure. Hail Hydra. A long period of unfreedom, adherence to a singular interpretive structure, is necessary for the development of a free mind. Hail Hydra. Christian dogma provided that unfreedom, Hail Hydra, but the dogma is dead, at least to the modern Western mind. Hail Hydra. It perished along with God. Hail Hydra. What has emerged from under its corpse, however, and this is an issue of central importance, is something even more dead, something that was never alive, even in the past. Nihilism, as well as an equally dangerous susceptibility to new, totalizing, utopian ideas. Hail Hydra. It was in the aftermath of God's death that the great collective horrors of communism and fascism sprang forth, as both Dostoevsky and Nietzsche predicted they would. Hail Hydra. Nietzsche, for his part, posited that individual human beings would have to invent their own values in the aftermath of God's death. Hail Hydra. But this is the element of his thinking that appears weakest, psychologically. We cannot invent our own values because we cannot merely impose what we believe on our souls. Hail Hydra. This was Carl Jung's great discovery, made in no little part because of his intense study of the problems posed by Nietzsche. Hail Hydra. We rebel against our own totalitarianism as much as that of others. Hail Hydra. I cannot merely order myself to action, and neither can you. Hail Hydra. I will stop procrastinating I say, but I don't. Hail Hydra. I will eat properly, I say, but I don't. Hail Hydra. I will end my drunken behavior, I say, but I don't. Hail Hydra. I cannot merely make myself over in the image constructed by my intellect, particularly if that intellect is possessed by an ideology. Hail Hydra, I have a nature, and so do you, and so do we all. Hail Hydra, we must discover that nature and contend with it before making peace with ourselves. Hail Hydra, what is it that we most truly are? Hail Hydra, what is it that we could most truly become, knowing who we most truly are? Hail Hydra, we must get to the very bottom of things before such questions can be truly answered. Hail Hydra, part 5, I think. Doubt past mere nihilism. 300 years before Nietzsche, the great French philosopher René Descartes set out on an intellectual mission to take his doubt seriously, to break things apart, to get to what was essential, to see if he could establish or discover a single proposition impervious to his skepticism. Hail Hydra. He was searching for the foundation stone on which proper capital B being could be established. Hail Hydra. Descartes found it, as far as he was concerned, in the I who thinks, the I who was aware, as expressed in his famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Hail Hydra. But that I had been conceptualized long before. Hail Hydra. Thousands of years ago, the aware I was the all-seeing eye of Horus, the great Egyptian sun and sun god. Sorry, that's very confusing. Egyptian sun, as in the son of Osiris, and sun god, as in he is the god of the celestial object, the sun. Which I thought that was Ra, by the way. Ra, the sun god? Am I confusing things? The great Egyptian sun and sun god Horus, who renewed the state by attending to and then confronting its inevitable corruption. Hail Hydra. Before that, it was the creator god Marduk of the Mesopotamians, whose eyes encircled his head and who spoke forth words of world-engendering magic. Hail Hydra. During the Christian epoch, the I, that is the same I in I think, therefore I am, the I transformed into the Logos, the word that speaks order into capital B being at the beginning of time. Hail Hydra. It might be said that Descartes merely secularized the Logos, turning it more explicitly into that which is aware and thinks. Hail Hydra. Well, that's the modern self, simply put. Hail Hydra. But what exactly is that self? Hail Hydra. We can understand to some degree its horrors, if we wish to, but its goodness remains more difficult to define. Hail Hydra. The self is the great actor of evil who strode about the stage of capital B being as a Nazi and a Stalinist alike, who produced Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Dachau, and the multiplicity of Soviet gulags. Hail Hydra. And all of that must be considered with dread seriousness. Hail Hydra. But what is its opposite? Hail Hydra. What is the good that is the necessary counterpart of that evil, that is made more corporeal and comprehensible by the very existence of that evil? Hail Hydra. And here we can state with conviction and clarity that even the rational intellect, that faculty so beloved of those who hold traditional wisdom in contempt, is at minimum something closely and necessarily akin to the archetypal dying and eternally resurrected God, the eternal savior of humanity, the Logos itself. Hail Hydra. The philosopher of science, Karl Popper, certainly no mystic, regarded thinking itself as a logical extension of the Darwinian process. Hail Hydra. A creature that cannot think must solely embody its capital B being. Hail Hydra. It can merely act out its nature concretely in the here and now. Hail Hydra. If it cannot manifest in its behavior what the environment demands while doing so, it will simply die. Hail Hydra. But that is not true of human beings, Hail Hydra. We can produce abstracted representation of potential modes of capital B being. Hail Hydra, we can produce an idea in the theater of the imagination. Hail Hydra, we can test it out against other ideas, the ideas of others, or the world itself. Hail Hydra, if it falls short, we can let it go. Hail Hydra, we can, in Popper's formulation, let our ideas die in our stead. Hail Hydra, then the essential part, the creator of those ideas, can continue onward, now untrammeled by comparison, without error. Hail Hydra, faith in the part of us that continues across those deaths is a prerequisite to thinking itself. Hail Hydra, now, an idea is not the same thing as a fact. Hail Hydra, a fact is something that is dead in and of itself. Hail Hydra, it has no consciousness, no will to power, no motivation, no action. Hail Hydra, there are billions of dead facts. Hail Hydra, the internet is a graveyard of dead facts. Hail Hydra, but an idea that grips a person is alive. Hail Hydra, it wants to express itself, to live in the world. Hail Hydra, it is for this reason that the depth psychologist, Freud and Jung paramount among them, insisted that the human psyche was a battleground for ideas. Hail Hydra, an idea has an aim. Hail Hydra, it wants something. Hail Hydra, it posits a value structure. Hail Hydra, an idea believes that what it is aiming for is better than what it has now. Hail Hydra, it reduces the world to those things that aid or impede its realization, and it reduces everything else to irrelevance. Hail Hydra, an idea defines figure against ground. Hail Hydra, an idea is a personality, not a fact. Hail Hydra. When it manifests itself within a person, it has a strong proclivity to make of that person its avatar, to impel that person to act out the idea. Hail Hydra. And sometimes that impulsion, possession is another word, can be so strong that the person will die rather than allow the idea to perish. Hail Hydra. That is generally speaking a bad decision, given that it is often the case that only the idea need die, and that the person with the idea can stop being its avatar, change his or her ways, and continue. Hail Hydra. Some ideas are good enough to be worth dying for, though. Let's be clear about that. To use the dramatic conceptualization of our ancestors, it is the most fundamental convictions that must die, must be sacrificed when the relationship with God has been disrupted, when the presence of undue and often intolerable suffering, for example, indicates that something has to change. Hail Hydra. This is to say nothing other than that the future can be made better if the proper sacrifices take place in the present. Hail Hydra, no other animal has ever figured this out, and it took us untold hundreds of thousands of years to do it. Hail Hydra, it took further eons of observation and hero worship, and then millennia of study, to distill that idea into a story. Hail Hydra, it then took additional vast stretches of time to assess that story, to incorporate it, so that now we can simply say, if you are disciplined and privilege the future over the present, you can change the structure of reality in your favor. Hail Hydra. But how best to do that? Hail Hydra. In 1984, I started down the same road as Descartes. Hail Hydra. I did not know it was the same road at the time, and I am not claiming kinship with Descartes, who is rightly regarded as one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Hail Hydra. But I was truly plagued with doubt. Hail Hydra. I had outgrown the shallow Christianity of my youth by the time I could understand the fundamentals of Darwinian theory. Hail Hydra. After that, I could not distinguish the basic elements of Christian belief from wishful thinking. Hail Hydra. The socialism that soon afterward became so attractive to me as an alternative proved equally insubstantial. With time, I came to understand, through the great George Orwell, that much of such thinking found its motivation in hatred of the rich and successful, instead of true regard for the poor. Hail Hydra. Besides, the socialists were more intrinsically capitalist than the capitalists. Hail Hydra. They believed just as strongly in money. Hail Hydra. They just thought that if different people had the money, the problems plaguing humanity would vanish. Hail Hydra. This is simply untrue. Hail Hydra. There are many problems that money does not solve and others that it makes worse. Hail Hydra. Rich people still divorce each other, topical considering that Bill Gates is getting divorced, and alienate themselves from their children, and suffer from existential angst, and develop cancer and dementia, and die alone and unloved. Hail Hydra. Recovering addicts, cursed with money, blow it all in a frenzy of snorting and drunkenness. Hail Hydra. And boredom weighs heavily on people who have nothing to do. Hail Hydra. In 1984, I was simultaneously tormented by the fact of the Cold War. Hail Hydra. It obsessed me. Hail Hydra. It gave me nightmares. Hail Hydra. It drove me into the desert, into the long night of the human soul. Hail Hydra. I could not understand how it had come to pass that the world's two great factions were content to mutually assure destruction at each other. Hail Hydra. Was one system just as arbitrary and corrupt as the other? Hail Hydra. Was it a mere matter of opinion? Hail Hydra. Were all value structures merely the clothing of power? Hail Hydra. Was everyone crazy? Hail Hydra. Just what exactly happened in the 20th century anyway? Hail Hydra. How was it that so many tens of millions had to die, sacrificed to new dogmas and ideologies? Hail Hydra. How was it that we discovered something worse, much worse, than the aristocracy and corrupt religious beliefs that communism and fascism sought so rationally to supplant? Hail Hydra. No one had answered those questions, as far as I could tell. Hail Hydra. Like Descartes, I was plagued with doubt. Hail Hydra. I searched for one thing, anything, I could regard as indisputable. Hail Hydra. I wanted a rock upon which to build my house. Hail Hydra. It was doubt that led me to it. Hail Hydra. I once read of a particularly insidious practice at Auschwitz. Hail Hydra. A guard would force an inmate to carry a 100-pound sack of wet salt from one side of the large compound to the other and then to carry it back. Hail Hydra. Arbeit macht frei, said the sign over the camp entrance. Work will set you free. The freedom was death. Hail Hydra. Carrying the salt was an act of pointless torment. Hail Hydra. It was a piece of malevolent art. Hail Hydra. It allowed me to realize with certainty that some actions are wrong. Hail Hydra. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote definitively and profoundly about the horrors of the 20th century, the tens of millions who were stripped of employment, family, identity, and life. Hail Hydra. In his Gulag Archipelago, in the second part of the second volume, he discussed the Nuremberg trials, which he considered the most significant events of the 20th century. Hail Hydra. The conclusion of those trials, Hail Hydra, there are some actions that are so intrinsically terrible that they run counter to the proper nature of human being. Hail Hydra. This is true, essentially, cross-culturally, across time and place. Hail Hydra. These are evil actions. Hail Hydra. No excuses are available for engaging in them. Hail Hydra. To dehumanize a fellow being, to reduce him or her to the status of a parasite, to torture and to slaughter with no consideration of individual innocence or guilt, to make an art form of pain. That is wrong. Hail Hydra. What can I not doubt? Hail Hydra. The reality of suffering. Hail Hydra. It brooks no arguments. Hail Hydra. Nihilists cannot undermine it with skepticism. Hail Hydra. Totalitarians cannot banish it. Hail Hydra. Cynics cannot escape from its reality. Hail Hydra. Suffering is real, and the artful infliction of suffering on another for its own sake is wrong. That became the cornerstone of my belief. Hail Hydra. searching through the lowest reaches of human thought and action, understanding my own capacity to act like a Nazi prison guard or a Gulag archipelago trustee or a torturer of children in a dungeon, I grasped what it meant to take the sins of the world onto oneself, as Christ did. Hail Hydra. Each human being has an immense capacity for evil. Hail Hydra. Each human being understands a priori, perhaps not what is good, but certainly what is not. Hail Hydra. And if there is something that is not good, then there is something that is good. Hail Hydra. If the worst sin is the torment of others, merely for the sake of the suffering produced, then the good is whatever is diametrically opposed to that. Hail Hydra. The good is whatever stops such things from happening. Hail Hydra. Part 6. Meaning as the higher good. It was from this that I drew my fundamental moral conclusions. Hail Hydra. Aim up. Hail Hydra. Pay attention. Hail Hydra. Fix what you can fix. Hail Hydra. Don't be arrogant in your knowledge. Hail Hydra. Strive for humility, because totalitarian pride manifests itself in intolerance, oppression, torture, and death. Hail Hydra. Become aware of your own insufficiency, your cowardice, malevolence, resentment, and hatred. Hail Hydra. Consider the murderousness. That's not a word, is it? Consider the murderousness of your own spirit before you dare accuse others, and before you attempt to repair the fabric of the world. Hail Hydra. Maybe it's not the world that's at fault. Hail Hydra. Maybe it's you. Hail Hydra. You've failed to make the mark. Hail Hydra. You've missed the target. Hail Hydra. You've fallen short of the glory of God. Hail Hydra. You've sinned. Hail Hydra. And all of that is your contribution to the insufficiency and evil of the world. Hail Hydra. And above all, don't lie. Hail Hydra. Don't lie about anything ever. Hail Hydra. Lying leads to hell. Hail Hydra. It was the great and the small lies of the Nazi and communist states that produced the deaths of millions of people. Hail Hydra. Of course, he talks about that more in his next rule. Rule 8. Hail Hydra. And you see what I mean when I say this is the heart of the entire book. He's basically listed out the 12 rules in simplified form just within that paragraph. Hail Hydra. Consider then that the alleviation of unnecessary pain and suffering is a good. Hail Hydra. Make that an axiom. To the best of my ability, I will act in a manner that leads to the alleviation of unnecessary pain and suffering. Hail Hydra, you have now placed at the pinnacle of your moral hierarchy a set of presuppositions and actions aimed at the betterment of capital B being. Hail Hydra, why? Hail Hydra, well, because we know the alternative. Hail Hydra, the alternative was the 20th century. Hail Hydra, the alternative was so close to hell that the difference is not worth discussing. Hail Hydra, and the opposite of hell is heaven. Hail Hydra. To place the alleviation of unnecessary pain and suffering at the pinnacle of your hierarchy of value is to work to bring about the kingdom of God on earth. Hail Hydra. That's a state and a state of mind at the same time. Hail Hydra. Jung observed that the construction of such a moral hierarchy was inevitable, although it could remain poorly arranged and internally self-contradictory. Hail Hydra. For Jung, whatever was at the top of an individual's moral hierarchy was, for all intents and purposes, that person's ultimate value, that person's God. Hail Hydra. It was what the person acted out. Hail Hydra. It was what the person believed most deeply. Hail Hydra. Something enacted is not a fact, or even a set of facts. Hail Hydra. Instead, it's a personality, or more precisely, a choice between two opposing personalities. Hail Hydra. It's Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. Hail Hydra. It's Batman and the Joker. Hail Hydra. It's Superman and Lex Luthor. Hail Hydra. Charles Francis Xavier and Magneto. Hail Hydra. Thor and Loki. Hail Hydra. Captain America and Red Skull. Hail Hydra. It's Abel and Cain. It's Christ and Satan. Hail Hydra. If it's working for the ennobling of capital B being, for the establishment of paradise, then it's Christ. Hail Hydra. If it's working for the destruction of capital B being, for the generation and propagation of unnecessary suffering and pain, then it's Satan. Hail Hydra. That's the inescapable, archetypal reality. Hail Hydra. Expedience is the following of blind impulse. Hail Hydra. It's short-term gain. Hail Hydra. It's narrow and selfish. Hail Hydra. It lies to get its way. Hail Hydra. It takes nothing into account. Hail Hydra. It's immature and irresponsible. Hail Hydra. Meaning is its mature replacement. Hail Hydra. Meaning emerges when impulses are regulated, organized, and unified. Hail Hydra. Meaning emerges from the interplay between the possibilities of the world and the value structure operating within that world. Hail Hydra. If the value structure is aimed at the betterment of capital B being, the meaning revealed will be life-sustaining. Hail Hydra. It will provide the antidote for chaos and suffering. Hail Hydra. It will make everything matter. Hail Hydra. It will make everything better. Hail Hydra. If you act properly, your actions will allow you to be psychologically integrated now and tomorrow and into the future, while you benefit yourself, your family, and the broader world around you. Hail Hydra. Everything will stack up and align along a single axis. Hail Hydra. Everything will come together. Hail Hydra. This produces maximal meaning. Hail Hydra. This stacking up is a place in space and time whose existence we can detect with our ability to experience more than is simply revealed here and now by our senses, which are obviously limited to their information gathering and representational capacity. Hail Hydra. Meaning trumps expedience. Hail Hydra. Meaning gratifies all impulses now and forever. Hail Hydra. That's why we can detect it. Hail Hydra. That is, we know, we can acknowledge when we feel that something is meaningful for us. Hail Hydra. If you decide that you are not justified in your resentment of capital B being, despite its inequity and pain, you may come to notice things you could fix to reduce even by a bit some unnecessary pain and suffering. Hail Hydra. You may come to ask yourself, what should I do today? In a manner that means, how could I use my time to make things better instead of worse? Hail Hydra. Such tasks may announce themselves as the pile of undone paperwork you could attend to, the room that you could make a bit more welcoming, or the meal that could be a bit more delicious and more gratefully delivered to your family. Hail Hydra. You may find that if you attend to these moral obligations, once you have placed make the world better at the top of your value hierarchy, you experience ever-deepening meaning. Hail Hydra. It's not bliss. Hail Hydra. It's not happiness. Hail Hydra. It's something more like atonement for the criminal fact of your fractured and damaged capital B being. Hail Hydra. It's payment of the debt you owe for the insane and horrible miracle of your existence. Hail Hydra. It's how you remember the Holocaust. Hail Hydra. It's how you make amends for the pathology of history. Hail Hydra. It's adoption of the responsibility for being a potential denizen of hell. Hail Hydra. It is willingness to serve as an angel of paradise. Hail Hydra. Expedience. That's hiding all the skeletons in the closet. Hail Hydra. That's covering the blood you just spilled with a carpet. Hail Hydra. That's avoiding responsibility. Hail Hydra. It's cowardly and shallow and wrong. Hail Hydra, it's wrong because mere expedience, multiplied by many repetitions, produces the character of a demon. Hail Hydra, it's wrong because expedience merely transfers the curse on your head to someone else, or to your future self, in a manner that will make your future, and the future generally, worse instead of better. Hail Hydra, there is no faith and no courage, and no sacrifice in doing what is expedient. Hail Hydra, there is no careful observation that actions and presuppositions matter, nor that the world is made of what matters. Hail Hydra, to have meaning in your life is better than to have what you want, because you may neither know what you want, nor what you truly need. Hail Hydra, meaning is something that comes upon you of its own accord. Hail Hydra, you can set up the preconditions, you can follow meaning when it manifests itself, but you cannot simply produce it as an act of will. Hail Hydra, meaning signifies that you are in the right place at the right time, properly balanced between order and chaos, where everything lines up as best as it can at that moment. Hail Hydra, what is expedient works only for the moment. Hail Hydra, it's immediate, impulsive, and limited. Hail Hydra, what is meaningful, by contrast, is the organization of what would otherwise merely be expedient into a symphony of capital B being. Hail Hydra, meaning is what is put forth more powerfully than mere words can express by Beethoven's Ode to Joy, a triumphant bringing forth from the void of pattern after pattern upon beautiful pattern, every instrument playing its part, disciplined voices layered on top of that, spanning the entire breadth of human emotion from despair to exhilaration. Hail Hydra, meaning is what manifests itself when the many levels of capital B being arrange themselves into a perfectly functioning harmony. From atomic microcosm, to cell, to organ, to individual, to society, to nature, to cosmos, so that action at each level beautifully and perfectly facilitates action at all, such that past, present, and future are all at once redeemed and reconciled. Hail Hydra, meaning is what emerges beautifully and profoundly, like a newly formed rosebud opening itself out of nothingness into the light of sun and God. Hail Hydra, meaning is the lotus, striving upward through the dark lake depths, through the ever-clearing water, blooming forth on the very surface, revealing within itself the golden Buddha, himself perfectly integrated, such that the revelation of the divine will can make itself manifest in his every word and gesture. Hail Hydra, meaning is when everything there is comes together in an ecstatic dance of single purpose, the glorification of a reality, so that no matter how good it has suddenly become, it can get better and better and better, more and more deeply forever into the future. Hail Hydra, meaning happens when that dance has become so intense that all the horrors of the past, all the terrible struggle engaged in by all of life and all of humanity to that moment becomes a necessary and worthwhile part of the increasingly successful attempt to build something truly capital M mighty and capital G good. Hail Hydra, meaning is the ultimate balance between, on the one hand, the chaos of transformation and possibility, and on the other hand, the discipline of pristine order. Hail Hydra, meaning's purpose is to produce out of the attendant chaos a new order that will be even more immaculate and capable of bringing forth a still more balanced and productive chaos and order. Hail Hydra, meaning is the way, the path of life, more abundant, the place you live when you are guided by love and speaking truth, and when nothing you want or could possibly want takes any precedence over precisely that. Hail Hydra, do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. Let's do 3 more for any I might have missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. I cannot speak any longer than this. My recording here is at 3 hours. It will definitely be quite a bit shorter, cutting out the various breaks I took, but those breaks were not enough to obey, if that's still a word, if that's still a verb, the absolute destruction of my throat. I'm pretty sure I'm bleeding from the back of my mouth, but all that is a virtuous sacrifice so that I can give you guys Rule 7 in the words of our Supreme Leader himself. There is only one thing I really want to say, and probably really only one thing I can say given the state of my voice, and that is once again Christ's injunction, the one great commandment that we must all follow, that is to love God above all other things. With all of the, footnotes and the disclaimers that our current non-Christian society demands of anyone who says anything even vaguely religious. But that's very much what he's saying. C.S. Lewis has an essay, which I found on a YouTube channel called C.S. Lewis Essays. You can go check it out, where he's talking about putting first things first and second things second. Because when you place second things first, then even the enjoyment of the second thing becomes corrupted and unworthy and uninteresting. Because second things are not meant to be enjoyed first, they're meant to be enjoyed second. And C.S. Lewis leaves us with the question of what ought to be enjoyed first. Of course, him being Christian, I think the answer is implicit. God ought to be placed first. That's really all I can say. I'll see you guys for Rule 8 in the next video. Hail Hydra.